Today we're going to be talking about absolute value equations. So we're going to be able to graph it given an equation. First of all, let's see what we got going on here. I can't move that up. That's a great. Absolute value y equals the absolute value of x. It's defined as a piecewise function. That's because absolute value technically is the positive and the negative value, what's inside. So it could be y equals x when x is greater than 0, y equals negative x. We can put an equal sign underneath there for y equals less than or equal to 0. Same difference. We can take off one of the equal signs. Doesn't matter where I put it. Absolute value is technically defined as the distance on a number line. What's up? Yeah. Absolute value is technically defined as distance on a number line. So when I look at it, I say, okay, how far am I away from 0? And it's almost always positive. So that's why we end up with this positive thing going on here. We want it to be above the y or the x-axis. If I put a table into it, -2, -1, 0, 1, and 2, I say absolute value of -2 is +2. +1, 0, +1, and +2. I'm going to go ahead and graph those. I can keep graphing. It's going to go up in the shape of a V for everywhere. And that's what it looks like. That's my parent function. And if I'm doing this thing, piecewise function, got to make it a function, good notation. So we're going to see what happens next. Okay, standard form of an absolute value equation. Y equals A absolute value x minus h plus k. A is my stretch or shrink factor. H and K is how it's moved. So H is how it's shifted horizontally. And K is how it's shifted vertically. Then the piecewise function, which really we've never dealt with absolute value as a piecewise function, but we're going to do it anyways, would look like this. I just took off the absolute value marks. You have your positive and your negative values, and I don't need those. I'm going to keep doing it, but I don't need an equal sign underneath 1 or else it won't be a function. You guys, in previous math classes, you've never learned absolute value as a piecewise function. It's kind of odd to see it written like this, so I'm not really concerned with you knowing that information on a test or a quiz. You guys know what an absolute value looks like. It's a V. You know get the table of functions for your parent function. We're going to talk about that in a second. Now, let's look at a less than or greater than. First of all, if I graph these things, I can't move that thing, so that's going to be great. Let's go ahead and graph it, and I'm going to try to fill in the table probably to the left of it because I can't move that thing up. Graphing this table style, doing transformational graphing. I have my x and my y of my parent function. How did I change it? I multiplied it by a half. So I take this y value and I multiply it by a half. So half of 2 is 1, 1/2, 0, 1/2, 1. Then I'm going to do the opposite of that, if you guys remember, because k is positive 3. So I'm going to take 1/2 y and add 3. This one's gone now that I multiplied it by half. So I'm going to add 3, I get 4. I get 3.5, 3, 3.5, and 4. And now this one's gone. To the x, and I think I actually did that backwards, didn't I? That is a negative 3. I can make mistakes because up above I have this and I just did the opposite of the wrong one. So I'm supposed to subtract 3 here, not add 3. Sorry about that. We'll do it again, not a big deal. So 1 minus 3 is negative 2, negative 1.5, nope, 2.5, negative 3, 1 minus 3, yes, half minus 3, yes, 0 minus 3, 1 minus 3 is negative 2. And then my x, my h is the opposite. So my h is actually positive 2. That's the one I take the opposite of. So I'm going to take this x and I'm going to add 2 to it. 0, 1, 2, 1, 0. I did something wrong. 3 and 4. I keep wanting to switch up my signs. Now that I'm recording, I'm making all kinds of mistakes because that's just how it's going to happen in my head. Now, what does this all mean, right? This looks all crappy and confusing, right? Is it confusing? Probably. Okay, I started, and I'll go back through this one more time. The whole point of this is now I have 5 points I can graph. Okay, the first one, and I'm going to take this off. If I look at that, the first one is the point 0, negative 2. That comes from this 0 and that negative 2. The second one is the point 0, or 1, negative 2.5. Then I have 2, negative 3, 3, negative 2.5, and finally 4, negative 2. So let me graph those and see what happens. 0, negative 2. 1, negative 2.5. 2, negative 3. 4, negative 2.5. And then finally 5, 4. And there's my absolute value equation. So you guys, that's the table method. I'll go through it one more time, and because people can't see me pressing when I'm actually going over the notes, I'm going to actually highlight and unhighlight. So what I start with is I start with my parent function. Okay, everyone in this room should know the parent function. That's just y equals the absolute value of x. So all I did was I plugged in around the origin. I started at 0, 0, and I went -1, +1, -2, +2. So I kind of centered my absolute value equation, which is what I did above, around the origin. So I graphed those 5 points. That's step 1. And I'm not even going to erase this. Step 2, in a different highlight color. Step 2 is right here. And actually, I'll highlight the box. That's step 2. And I multiplied by my a value. I took whatever I had in the y value and I multiplied by how it was going to shrink. And if you look, what I did to that absolute value mark is I made it wider. So that's what I did here. Now the third step, and this is where I probably confused a whole lot of people because I messed up a little bit, is I took my k value of -3. That's step 3. I took my k value of -3 and I subtracted 3 from what I got in the previous column. So this builds on each other. Step 1 was my parent. Then I used my y values to get step 2. Then step 3, I used what I just did to actually subtract 3 from those 5 values. And then finally, which I could have done number 2 if I really wanted to, I took x minus 2 and I used my h value of +2 to come up with that. And what that did for me was that gave me coordinates to graph. So in this lovely light pink, I have 0, -2, 1, -2.5, 2, -3, 3, -2.5, 4, and -2. So I got 5 points to graph. That's very systematic, and it's using a table, and it works every single time if I follow those 4 steps. 5 steps, really, was getting the coordinates, and then step 6 would be graphing. Is there a different way to do this? There is. This is very systematic, works every single time. Let's graph it again just a little bit different. Here's another way I can do it. What is my HK? I'm going to do this one in blue. What is my HK? It's 2, -3. I have to take the opposite of the one with the X, and I copy the one with the Y. That becomes my new origin. Okay? My new origin, 2, -3. So this point right here becomes my new XY. I can do that. If I was graphing my regular absolute value one, I would start at the origin and I put a dot there. Normally, I go over 1, up 1, and backwards 1, up 1. That's my normal one. But because my A value, I'm going to take those 2 points off. If it comes off, my A value is 1/2, which tells me instead of going over 1, up 1, I'm going to go over 1, up 1/2. Over 1, up 1/2, over 1, up 1/2. Normally I go over 2, up 2. This time I'm going to go over 2, and what's half of 2? So I'm going to go over 2, up 1. Over 2, up 1. By the way, those are the exact same 5 points that I found using the table. You can graph these absolute value equations any way you want to. I'm not done, by the way. Why am I not done? What did I not take care of? What is this sign right here? So there is no equal sign. Do you guys understand that? This would be an open circle. So what has to happen to this? This has to be a dotted line. Okay, I should probably add the points I erased at least so we know where they are. And am I going to shade below or above? Less than. Below. So I go to my y-axis and I shade below. And this is the answer to this problem. If I fill in this table over here, which we cannot see, I don't even know what it says up there, looks like the equal sign. It straight up looks like this. The less than, they're all going to be V's. This should be in the column next to it, by the way. I'm just filling it in here. So these two should be dotted. Okay. Why? Because there's no equal sign. Less than, and I'm going to change my shade a little bit. Less than is shaded below. This one's shaded above. I don't know if you can follow that. Hopefully you can. This one is shaded below, and this one is also shaded above. And that should be in the next column to the right of that table that I can't make it be any smaller because I'm recording. And I didn't realize the thing was going to cut over it. And I know this looks super duper messy, and I'm apologizing for that because I write everywhere. Oh, I lost the thing. Of course I did. Oh, here it is. Okay, let's see what's next. Okay, it wants us to graph two of these. I prefer, my personal preference, by the way, is not to do that horrible table because it ends up getting really big and frustrating. But some people like to follow it. Okay, so if you want me to do a table, I will. More importantly to me here, A equals -2. That tells me that it's going to look like this, by the way. And HK equals 5, 4. So what I normally do is I go to the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4. That becomes my new origin. My parent function of this one I'm plugging in the same 5 points every single time. And it's upside down. So from here, I know some people, it only helps them to maybe do the second part of the table where we actually multiply this thing by -2 or +2 in this case, because I did the regular y if I wanted to. I took care of it there. So I'm just going to multiply it by 2, and I would get -4, -2, 0, -2, and -4. I could have put positives here and made it, but if you look, that was my parent. I already added it. So I kind of took care of it. So I'm going to go over 1, down 2, over 1, down 2, down 1, 2, 4, and 4. And this one has no shading, so I'm done. The next one, my parent. Yes. Here, I figured that might confuse some people. What I did here, and I can take care of it like this. My actual parent function is just the absolute value of x. So when I do just the absolute value of x, I get 2, 1, 0, 1, 2, right? So what I did was I multiplied by my a value. So that's where I took care of the negative. At first, I just took care of the negative in my head right there, and I don't need to do that. If I take care of the regular parent and I multiply it by -2, that's where those come from. Because I knew it was facing down, I kind of just handled my business early. This one, I'm going to change my parent a little bit because what am I going to end up multiplying by? What is my a value? 1/5. I'm not going to want to plug in the number 1 because what is 1 multiplied by 1/5? Does that make a pretty graph? No. But what I do know about my absolute value, x, y. I'm going to plug in a 0 and get a 0. When I plug in a -5, what do I get? What's the absolute value of -5? 5. What's the absolute value of -10? What's the absolute value of +5? What's the absolute value of +10? Now, my a value dictates, and this is where this is the only part of the table you might want to actually stick to. It's 1/5 y. So what's 1/5 of 10? 2. What's 1/5 of 5? What's 1/5 of 0? What's 1/5 of 5? 1/5 of 10? Don't these make nicer points than having 1/5, 2/5? So these are the 5 points that I'm going to graph at my new origin. My HK is -1, -4. I go to the -1, -4. That's my new 0, 0. Transformational graphing dictates that I split it backwards 1 and down 4. Now I'm going to graph these 5 points from the new origin. So 0, 0 is already graphed. -5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and an up 1. I can't graph 10 because it's way over here. I'm going to graph +5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, up 1. Can't graph +10, but look how I tried to hit the points. I've missed both of them because it's so wide, but I have them there. Is this going to be a dotted or a solid line? Solid line, so I'm good. I don't have to erase spaces. Am I shading above or below? Above, because it's greater than. So I'm going to go to the curve. I normally grab a highlighter and shade above. And that's my answer. Okay, the next thing in your packet is that walking the line activity that you're going to go through and try to do. And then you have your homework assignment, which is looking exactly like the other ones, where you can do the first column and call it a day.